Welcome to The Hype Within, exploring journeys of authentic leadership and growth. This segment, Leadership on the Go, will be your quick dose of leadership wisdom. We'll distill key insights from the world of leadership and communication into bite-sized nuggets of knowledge. Whether you're a seasoned leader or just starting on your journey, these rapid-fire tips will empower you to lead with authenticity, overcome fear, and prevent burnout. So wherever you are, take a moment to pause, reflect, and grow as a leader with Leadership on the Go. I'm your host, Hannah Jacover, B2B marketing leader turned leadership and executive coach. Are you ready to get hyped up? Let's dive in. Hey leaders, last time on Leadership on the Go, we talked about psychological safety. We broke down the concept and provided a little bit of research that has been done around the topic, as well as give you some ideas on how to foster psychological safety in the workplace. Today, I want to break down psychological safety in a different way for you. I'm going to do this by taking a neuroscience, brain-based approach, because sometimes when we look at something differently, it's easier to understand why we are doing it, why it's necessary, and you can also maybe see a different approach to it. Because with psychological safety, sometimes it's not enough to tell somebody to be more empathetic, be more inclusive. That can be hard to actually implement, especially if those are areas that you maybe need to work on. So let's break this down in a little bit of a different way. Our brains are constantly trying to minimize threats and maximize rewards. That's a huge job of the brain. That's what keeps us alive. There's no in between. We either perceive something as a threat or we perceive something as a reward. So we're just threat, reward, threat, reward. We're very simple in that context. And because of evolution, our brains have become pretty good at detecting threats, more so than detecting rewards, because it's advantageous for us to see the threat before we see the reward, because then we can do what we need to do to protect ourselves and feel safe and survive. Unfortunately, this does cause us to be activated more times and probably more times than necessary. So once a threat is detected, and depending on the level of threat, that's important because a level 1 threat versus a level 2 versus a level 3 threat are very different. A level 1 threat is actually proven to help us in terms of performance. So thinking about level 2 or level 3 threats, once that threat is detected, a network of nerves called the sympathetic nervous system helps activate a stress response that is going to push us into either fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. And this process, as you probably know, heavily impacts us both physically, emotionally, mentally. You have your stress hormone that is released, cortisol. Your heart rate's going to increase. Your vision's going to narrow. There's so many things that happen when we go into this response. It is a process, again, that is meant to prepare us to feel safe and survive. Obviously, being activated all the time is not good because then you're just going to live in survival mode. For the purposes of this episode, I want to think of this more from a leadership perspective versus an individual perspective. On the individual side, however, we do need to understand what is going on in our brain. And so this is just what's happening, whether you like it or not. That doesn't mean you have to be activated all the time by all these little things that your brain is perceiving as a threat. Once you understand what is happening, you can make changes. You can train your brain. You can build new neural pathways that allow you to stay calm in situations and not feel activated when you are actually safe. I'm not going to dig into that individual method on how to approach feeling activated all the time and how to build those new neural pathways. That's something that I work with my coachees on quite often and something that I talk about all the time. But again, for this episode, I want to focus on what this means for leaders and how we can use this information to build better environments and to create better relationships for our employees. So here's the interesting thing. I don't feel like we often focus on what will potentially activate those around us from a brain-based perspective. We're not walking around being like, oh my gosh, am I going to activate your sympathetic nervous system by saying a certain thing or doing a certain action? We think about it from an emotional perspective. If I say this, are they going to be upset? If I say this, are they going to be sad? Or we don't think about it at all. And so sometimes this way of thinking can be detrimental because our brains will do this no matter what. So it is beneficial for us, especially in leadership positions, to be thinking about this from a brain-based perspective. Something as simple as saying, "Can I give you feedback?" Or even the words performance review can elicit this stress response in most humans because we perceive it as a threat. And so the reason why those two things particularly come off as a threat for us is because our status is threatened at that moment. Our perceived status is being questioned, and we perceive that there's somebody that has created a hierarchy that is then going to look down and say, let me give you some feedback. That's threatening for us. This is why things like feed forward and understanding effective ways of giving feedback is really important. So here's kind of the aha. When our social needs are met, we are able to maximize reward and minimize threats. This is because we feel safe. And in the workplace, as well as every other area of our life, we need to be aware of what those social needs are that our brains consider absolutely essential for safety and survival. I want to introduce a really great model. Dr. David Rock has done quite a bit of really interesting research on this topic. He founded the Neuro Leadership Institute, and he developed a model called the SCARF model. And this is a really great tool that you can use when you're trying to understand and implement psychological safety and look at it from a different angle. So this model highlights the 5 key domains that influence our human social experiences and determine if we feel safe or not. So they really can help us understand why psychological safety is so critical. So it's connecting these two ideas, these two concepts, that will enable you to take this brain-based approach to psychological safety for everyone around you. So when your needs are met, you maximize rewards. As a leader, it's a balancing act between these 5 domains and knowing how to activate a reward response versus a threat response. I'm going to go through each of these domains. SCARF stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. When we think about status, we want to feel respected. We want to feel recognition. We want to feel included. We want to feel as if we're all on the same level. And when there is a decline in our perceived status, it can lead to major stress and reduced productivity. When we think about psychological safety, we are promoting an environment where it's very equitable and everyone feels valued. Certainty. When we think about certainty, it's clarity. I understand my role. I understand my responsibilities. I understand the expectations. It's also thinking about that transparent communication. I know what's coming. Open communication, transparency, reduced ambiguity. Autonomy. We all crave control over our work and our decisions, in and outside of work, right? Like autonomy is very, very important. Let me even just do a little bit of an aside here. I have a 5-year-old. My 5-year-old absolutely needs his autonomy. When I'm trying to get him to accomplish a task, I have to come at it from a very creative angle. to where I'm not saying you need to do this and this is how you're going to do it. Instead, he needs to come up with his own solution to do it. And I have to think of ways to encourage that, to like bring that out. So if the weather outside is rainy and cold and I want him to wear appropriate clothing, I can't always be like, hey, you got to wear pants and a jacket and a sweatshirt today and a hat. He doesn't like that. So it's more a conversation around, like, let's check the weather today. I wonder what the weather person said. And the weather person said it's going to be this temperature and it's going to rain for this long. And it looks like, oh, it's going to rain when you're outside at school. What do you think we should wear based on this information? So I'm giving him the autonomy to make that decision and to process that information and come up with his own solution. Okay, Mom, I think I'm going to wear pants. I think I'm going to wear a sweatshirt. Now, obviously, he's 5, so I might have to step in and, nudge him towards some things if he doesn't make the choice that is appropriate for the weather. But anyways, when we have a lack of autonomy, it stifles our creativity and increases stress. When we think about a psychologically safe environment, we're enabling individuals to come up with their own solutions, voice their ideas, and take initiative on their own. Relatedness. So we're social beings. Workplace isolation, especially in this day and age, can lead to huge disengagement. So we really need to promote a sense of belonging and building strong relationships. And these are crucial aspects of psychological safety. We're all here on this earth to connect, building relationships. We are a relationship-based species. So having that relatedness is really, really important for us to feel safe. Fairness. So perceived injustice harms morale and motivation. When I don't think that something is fair, I don't feel safe. And it makes me not want to perform. It doesn't make me feel good about the situation. I'm sure you have similar feelings as well. There's lots of really interesting studies on fairness out there that kind of showcase the way that we behave when we perceive things aren't fair. So a psychologically safe environment fosters trust and fairness where everyone's voice matters and morale is very important. And we ensure that there are core values that we are operating on. So that is the SCARF model. And when you embrace this SCARF model and this way of thinking about creating a psychologically safe environment, it can really help unlock your team's full potential. And it also just gives you a different way of thinking about psychological safety. You can bring it back to that brain-based approach where you know that these 5 areas your brain considers essential to safety and survival. And everyone can have a different stack rank. I might see autonomy as my number 1, like my son, whereas somebody else might see fairness as their number 1. It becomes a balancing act of, okay, I understand my team and how they kind of rank in terms of their SCARF domains. And I also know how to activate a reward response within each of those domains versus a threat response in each of those domains. This is a big job as a leader. How do I make sure that I am focused on this reward response and ensuring that these social needs are met for my team so we can create this psychologically safe environment? I think that it's an interesting conversation to have when we start bringing in elements of neuroscience, how our brains work. Because when we are working with individuals and trying to achieve a particular goal, we need to work with the whole individual, which includes our brain, especially because our brain is responsible for many, many, many of the things that we do. And our brains are going to determine if we feel safe or not. So if we can tap into this as leaders and ensure that we have a full understanding of how our brains work, what's important for us to pay attention to in terms of bringing out the best in people and ensuring that we make them feel safe. If we can make them feel safe, then we're going to create the most optimal environment for working together. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. I hope you walk away with something empowering that you can take into your own leadership journey. Are you a high-performing executive looking to take your career to the next level, or an emerging leader who wants to develop the skills you need to advance in your role and show up authentically? Or maybe you're experiencing burnout and struggling to find a better work-life balance. Whatever your situation is, coaching can help you achieve your personal and professional goals. If you're interested in learning about and experiencing the power of coaching for yourself, head on over to hypehousecoaching.com/start coaching now, where you can set up a one-on-one leadership and executive coaching intro session for free. Remember, the only hype that really matters is the hype within.